Welcome into the second edition of Cavs and Coffee with Jason Lloyd. I am Mikey McNuggets. We did the 8 a.m. start last weekend, Jason. We asked the good people out there, did you like the early starts? And we got an overwhelming response of yes. So maybe not every week, but when we can, we will give you guys some early morning Cavs content. And frankly speaking, as catchy as the ultimate Cavs show name might be, Cavs and Coffee is significantly more catchy. And I actually think we should lean into that branding moving forward here, Jason.
And good news, my son did not miss the bus this morning because school was canceled. So that was easy.
Because of the snow?
The cold, which is a bunch of crap if you ask me.
Yeah, listen, as someone who grew up in New Jersey, it snowed all the time. We had 2-hour delays. We had snow days. I have never heard of cold days.
Yeah.
When I lived in Texas, if it was like 51 degrees, cold day, no school. If it was a 50-degree cold, granted, it's colder here than it was in Texas. Cold day is not an excuse. You have heaters. You're a big building.
Yeah.
It baffles me that is a legitimate, and I don't even want to say valid. I'm sure it is, but to me, it does not seem valid. Reason to miss school.
I'm with you. I think it's for the walkers. It's for the kids who walk to school.
Yeah, fair.
But I mean, come on. We went to school plenty of days when it was this cold. They just said, put your coat on. Go.
Yeah.
Whatever. So they had a 4-day weekend. So this is now a 5-day weekend. So these kids are living their best lives right now.
Well, we are remote today for the Ultimate Cavs Show, like always. We will also be remote today for the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show at 11. Just giving you guys a heads up. Director Steve will be back tomorrow. He is not cleared to return to work yet, so he can't come in. And Anthony broke a 102-degree fever last night. So we don't have a director. And if we don't have a director, you do not want to see me try and punch buttons and produce the show when I don't know how to punch buttons in the first place. So we will be remote at 11 o'clock. So just a fair warning now. It is not because anything's wrong. We just simply don't have a director. So I wanted to clear that up. We'll mention it again at the end of the show. But if you tune into UCSS today at 11, you will see a show that looks very similar to this, Jason, because Dustin, Tyvis, G. Bush, and myself will all be sitting at home in front of a camera doing it remote as opposed to traditionally in studio. So just giving you guys the fair warning ahead of time so no one gets too shocked when that comes across later this morning. But Jason, the Cavaliers are getting ready for the proverbial second half of their season. And I figure today, without any games to break down and without any new numbers to digest, would be the perfect day to do a little Cavs second half storyline draft. Now, there's no winners and losers in this draft, but we will make our selections based on what we feel is the most important storyline for the second half for Cleveland, going down to our lesser important storylines. We said we may go 3 rounds. We may go 4 rounds. It'll depend on how the draft selections go. But with that, Jason, you are up first in the 2025 Cavs second half storyline draft. And with the first selection, you are taking, drumroll please,
with the first pick in the UCSS Cavs draft, DeAndre Hunter. Might be the first time he's ever gone first overall, but just figuring out his role, figuring out where he fits on this team. I was actually thinking about it this morning. You know, we went back and forth on the show about where does he fit, Hunter, Wade starting or Max Drew starting. Do you start DeAndre? Do you bring him off the bench? And I didn't love the idea of Max starting in this lineup. I thought the other guys added more length, but obviously with Dean being out, it's down to DeAndre or Max. And the more I thought about it, I was like, I thought Atlanta was kind of smart. And one of the things you hear out of that side is that they protected him a little bit. He's obviously had a ton of injuries, so you can protect his minutes a little bit and protect his role a little bit by bringing him off the bench. I think the Cavs have clinched a playoff spot, maybe not mathematically, but I'm pretty sure the Cavs are going to be a playoff team this year. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, to leave him in a bench role for now, just to try sort of protect where he's at and protect the minutes. And then, as we've been talking about, Kenny loves to experiment, and he's had a lot of success with it. Maybe as you get closer to the postseason, you make that switch if you want to put him into the starting lineup so that those guys get a feel for playing with each other. Or maybe you just love it so much that you leave him in that spot because he can play other positions and he can be sort of your backup 4 as well. I guess I'm not coming around on the idea of bringing him off the bench, but in a way I kind of am, only just to protect his minutes and try and keep him healthy. But I do think by the postseason, it's time to make that switch. Or when Dean is healthy, if Dean is healthy, that's my number one lineup still. I just really like the way that looked. We've talked about it all year. But just sort of bringing clarity to DeAndre's role and what he's going to be over the second half of the season into the playoffs.
Yeah, that would have been my number one selection too, is how do the Cavs integrate DeAndre Hunter, not only into their offense, but into their defensive principles too. And we've seen it for 2 games, and it was a pretty damn impressive 2 games, Jason. They beat the Timberwolves in a game that literally was never close. The game was over in the first 2.5 minutes and never became a game again. And then they beat the Toronto Raptors with him coming off the bench on Wednesday in a game that once again was never close. So we have yet to see a crunch time situation with DeAndre Hunter. We are yet to see him play in any sort of a competitive fourth quarter. So I'm not drawing any conclusions of how he's been used from his first 2 games. And Kenny told us, don't look anything into this more than we're trying to integrate a guy into both sides of our basketball team. From an offensive standpoint, will DeAndre Hunter be a primarily creator, or will he be the recipient of other creators? And that's where I think you have to figure out how good is DeAndre Hunter at creating. And if he is good enough to create legitimate good looks by himself against a playoff caliber defense, then does he need to be playing with our 3 primary highest usage players so he's not being wasted as a guy who's being the recipient of offense? And from a defensive standpoint, it depends on certain matchups. If you're playing against Boston, you need Wade or Hunter in the starting lineup, and frankly, probably preferably Hunter, just for the size, length, and for the fact that you don't have Max Strus somehow guarding Kristaps Porzingis on these switches. Like, that is a losing proposition from the get-go. I've said time after time I'm less interested in who starts as opposed to who finishes for the Cavs, and Hunter should be in that finishing 5. But there are certain matchups where I don't want to go into the first 6 minutes of a game with a legitimate size disadvantage on the wing and having other teams take advantage of that, exploit that potential weakness. And then you're starting the game off in the first couple of minutes down big points. But the Cavs, for the most part this season, have been terrific in the first quarter. Jason, I want to show you a chart here. It's going to be small, so I'm glad you have your glasses on. But our good friend Bob Schmidt over at the Fear the Fro Pod put together the net ratings, offensive ratings, defensive ratings, and net of the core 4 plus Strus, the core 4 plus Wade, the core 4 plus Okoro, and then in very small minutes, the core 4 plus DeAndre Hunter against all teams and then the best teams in the East. And I thought this was a really interesting and pretty well-designed chart here to give you a little sample size of who's played the best against the best. And if you can see this, against top 4 seeds in the Eastern Conference, the core 4 with Max and the core 4 with Dean Wade has been very good. Plus 19 with Max, plus 13.46 with Dean Wade. They're a minus 9.6 with Isaac Okoro. It's a smaller sample size against that top 4. It's only 4 games with Okoro as opposed to 3 each for Strus and Dean Wade. But you can see where these numbers bear out. And Jason, to me, Isaac could be an important part of the team. He is not in the discussion to be a starter anymore. He is more in the discussion as is he in the playoff rotation or not? And then you can mix and match Wade, Hunter, and Strus to kind of figure out how to best attack the opponent. So I'm with you. How you integrate DeAndre Hunter into the fold here, in my opinion, is also the biggest storyline for the Cavs to keep an eye on in the second half here.
Yeah, I don't think Isaac is in the rotation. And if everybody's healthy, if there's no injuries, I don't think he's getting significant playoff minutes. Maybe in a spot, you're trying to guard a side out of bounds late in a game or something like that. But I don't think he's part of this rotation.
Let's go to my first pick here, Jason. And if you have anything else to add, we could come back to the Hunter stuff. But it's going to be woven into a bunch of these next topics. But my number one storyline to watch over the final 24 games here for Cleveland is how hard do they push guys as opposed to making sure they are 100% healthy for the playoffs. You want to get hot and be at your hottest entering the playoffs. And to get to your peak form, you need your best guys to be playing. But over the final 24 games, the Cavs have 5 back-to-backs. They play 5 games in 7 or 8 days, depending on how you want to count the calendar, but essentially a Tuesday to Tuesday, 5 games in a week stretch, 3 different times. They have a daunting West Coast road trip in there. The 1 seed is important. Do not misconstrue what I'm saying. But health and having your best guys available for the playoff run is the most important thing for the Cavs' championship chances, in my opinion. And how Kenny Atkinson and company decide to give certain guys days off, handle the back-to-backs, handle the 5 and 7s, while out without kind of sacrificing their position of first place in the East to ensure they get the 1 seed is going to be a real test. And granted, they have a nice little cushion right now, and kudos to them for building that cushion. So there's going to be a lot fewer really tough decisions to make in that regard. But how Kenny Atkinson and company handle the gauntlet of the month of March schedule-wise versus keeping winning a priority and resting guys so they're fully healthy and 100% ready to go for a playoff push, to me, that is the second biggest storyline the Cavs, that I'll be following for the Cavs in this final month and a half here.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you go back, obviously this is a team that prioritizes rest. They were undefeated and they sat Donovan. If you go way back, the game before the first Boston game. And that was the game that they said they circled early prior to the season over the summer, that was a rest game. Whether that was a rest game because of the schedule leading up to it, or whether that was a rest game to make sure he was ready for Boston, I tend to think it was more the former, that they just looked at the schedule and said, this is a good time to get him a break. I don't know that they were really worried about who would ever thought that they'd have been unbeaten going into that game. But that just shows that they stuck to it. They had this plan prior to the season, even though they were off to this incredible start, they stuck to the plan. I'm with you. I think the 1 seed is very important to this team. When you're talking about a series against Boston, obviously you want Game 7 to be here and not there. That's a really, really hard arena to play in, but at what cost? And I'll be curious to see how they balance it. Who gets days off when they've obviously done a really good job with the minutes, of splicing up the minutes. They've tried to make an emphasis on keeping Donovan's minutes in shorter bursts this year. Last year, it got kind of elongated when he was on the floor. He was on the floor for a really long time. They're trying to chop that up this year, and they feel like he's more effective in short bursts than playing 8 minutes of a quarter. And so how they tinker with that going on down the stretch, I said Okoro's not in the playoff rotation. I don't think that he is, but obviously you can play him now. You play him from now to April. You got to keep all these guys ready. And that sort of leads into my next one. So I'll stop there. Perfect. But I'm with you on I think they really need to prioritize the 1 seed. But I know that just based on history, they'll stick to their plan of what they have for guys.
What's your next pick then, Jason? Pick number 3 in the Cavs' second half storyline draft.
What's your rotation and who fits with whom in terms of bench guys? I think I thought I mentioned this on the big show, I think, on UCSS, but I don't think it's really gotten talked about enough. Is the one thing that this trade did was bring clarity to some guys' roles, because it just never felt, as much as Kenny was saying he wanted to play 10, I didn't think that was feasible. Still don't think that's feasible. And certainly as you get later into the playoffs, it's just not feasible. You want your best guys on the floor. The Cavs' problem was they were having a hard time, I think, deciphering who's their best guys. And by making the move with Karras and George, shipping them out and bringing in DeAndre, I think you have a clear top 8. The core 4, whoever you want to put in that 5th spot between Hunter and Wade, whoever the other guy is 6, Max is 7, and Ty Jerome is 8. To me, there's a pretty steep drop after 8 if you're talking about playoff crunch time rotation minutes. And hey, listen, maybe Ty Jerome falls flat in the playoffs because it's his first time experiencing it, and teams have a whole season of watching his tendencies, and now teams are going to spend 2 weeks watching him. Obviously, Ty Jerome's not your number 1 priority, but there'll be a scouting report now on Ty Jerome going into this playoff series. So maybe they do need to go deeper down the bench. And, guys have to be ready because everybody's going to get a chance at some point. Isaac Okoro could very well get a chance to help this team in a postseason series at some point. Sam Merrill could get a chance to help this team in a postseason series at some point. But to me, that is your top 8, and that's a good number for a playoff rotation. And then if you need to play a 9th guy, 4 or 5 minutes, you have Isaac, you have Sam, whatever. But those are the 8 that you're relying on. So now who fits with who, and what are your best lineups that you can throw out on the court? And the one thing, we've talked about this before, the one thing that you don't want to see that there's really no excuse for is to throw out 5 guys in a postseason series that have never played together. Yeah. And we saw that last year, and that's just inexcusable to me. Like, you have 82 games to prepare for this. How can you now, in the most important games of the season, be caught in a situation where you're putting guys out there who haven't seen the floor together before? So use this time to continue to mix and match. Does Hunter fit what better with Mobley or with Allen? And obviously there'll be times when they're all out there together. But, if you go back and look, how many times when we're talking starting lineup, and this is to your point about it's more important who finishes, how many minutes does that 5 really, truly get together in a game? It's probably not as many as you would think because guys are constantly coming in and out. So who does he fit better with, Donovan or Darius? And these are all questions that Kenny has the next 20 some odd games to answer.
Yeah, 197 minutes, Jason. That is the most minutes any 5-man lineup has played for the Cavs this season. It's the core 4 plus Dean Wade in the starting 5. Like, that's fewer than 200 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, to your point with the rotations, this was also on my list. I'm glad we're kind of in line thinking I had it a little lower, but one of the things we haven't given Kenny enough credit for, and we may not have mentioned this at all on the show, and bad job for all of us for kind of missing this, but we talk about all the stuff Kenny's done that JB hadn't. One of the things that Kenny did was change the pairings. Last season, it was Donovan and Jarrett and DG and Evan. And this year, Kenny's flipped that. DG and Allen now are the big guard tandem in the second, I guess you could call it a rotation, but they come out together, they go in together.
Yeah.
And Evan and Donovan are now paired up. And those two are the two highest minute 2-band pairings on the entire team. Very rarely do you see Donovan in and Evan not there with him. And the same with Darius and Jarrett. And that little tweak may not seem like a lot. You're still playing with the big. Well, the net numbers across the board are better for the pairings this year than they were last year. And it doesn't take a crazy thing to tinker with, but you have to have the confidence because you're changing something that had 2-3 years of buildup prior. So now how do you fit DeAndre Hunter into that?
Right.
And how do you fit the other guys around that, those 2 pillars of any given lineup? And come playoff time, when you're only going 8 and not 9 or 10 like Kenny's continued doing the regular season, who do you keep in on that first rotation? So instead of taking 3 guys out, you're only taking 2 guys out. Who's the third one that stays? But now you need to fill, okay, DeAndre Hunter's coming in. That gives a little more size. We're probably still taking in Allen, but are we giving up enough ball? Like, that's the stuff that over these next 24 games, I'm hoping Kenny not only tinkers with, but go crazy. Like against Brooklyn on Thursday night, maybe that's not the greatest example because it's their first game back. But how about against, Utah on Sunday, March 23rd? Try everything. Like,
yeah.
If you lose that game at the end of the day, who cares? And frankly, you should be able to beat Utah regardless of which lineup combinations you're playing with.
Right.
Let's give some of these newer lineups looks at an extended run as opposed to the 2-3 minute stretches we get during a close game, because you're going to need that experience. And DeAndre Hunter in particular is going to need that playing time and those reps with certain lineups to feel comfortable throwing it out against a Boston or a New York or a Giannis-led Milwaukee or even Orlando, who's had the season from hell. They don't scare me, but they're on my radar. I'm not just completely dismissing them.
They're on my radar.
With how they play defense, I am all for Kenny Atkinson getting crazy and just trying shit out down the last 24 games of the season, because I'd rather him do it now.
Yeah.
Learn what does or doesn't work, and you may not even get a conclusive answer, but at least you can get some data points.
Yeah.
As opposed to just throwing it out there in a playoff series when it has to work. Like, there's no alternate option in the playoff series. It has to work. It doesn't have to work against Utah on March 23rd.
No, that's a good point. And it just popped in my head. We had, during the pandemic, we had a Slack channel at The Athletic called Let's Get Weird. And it was just there was no sports going on, so you got to come up with something. We have subscribers. We can't lose subscribers. We got to write something. So we wrote things like, who would win a mascot battle if all the mascots were real? And I had this idea of who would win a game between Bull Durham's team and the Cleveland Indians from Major League, and like just random, wacky, weird stuff. Well, Kenny, let's get weird, because you never know who's going to fall into foul trouble and who's going to pull a hamstring or roll an ankle in a playoff series. And now you're scrambling a little bit. And now the top 8 that we're talking about that looks so beautiful and pristine together, you are to 10 or 11. So what do you do then, and who fits with whom? So, hey, let's get weird for 20-some games.
Well, that brings me to my next one, Jason. It leads right into it. You mentioned the top 8. I agree with you that is the top 8 for a Cavaliers playoff rotation. The one thing missing from that top 8 is a real backup big, right? And they're not going to find a real backup big currently on the buyout market with the guys available. With all due respect to Tristan Thompson, it's not Tristan Thompson. If you're playing Tristan Thompson in the second quarter of a playoff game, something's gone very, very, very wrong. So the thing the storyline I guess I'm going to follow pretty closely here is they still have a few more days where they have to convert a two-way to a roster spot to meet the minimum requirement of players. I'm not sure what the exact date is. It's probably Thursday because it's 2 weeks from the trade, I would assume. Yeah. But they still have 3 days to see if there's any change in the buyout market, and there still could be some guys bought out. So that's a potential possibility. And a guy like Clint Capella in Atlanta, who they just did a deal with, is rumored as a guy who could be bought out. Now, if you could find a Clint Capella to sign as a buyout guy, he at least has some veteran presence. He's played in the playoffs before. I'd be all for that. But if you're not going to get a buyout guy, Jason, is there anyone on the G League on a two-way contract that you could convert that you would feel halfway decent about just having him as an option in your tool bag? I am not suggesting any of these guys will play. I'm not suggesting any of these guys will be in the playoff rotation by any means. But if you look at some of the numbers Luke Travers has put up lately, and Naquan Tomlin, Jason, who is a legit 6'10" big with some athleticism and can shoot the three, I'd be interested to see what those guys can do at the NBA level down the stretch over these final 24 regular season games. And maybe, just maybe, you strike gold. We've seen Luke Travers for tiny stretches. I don't believe we've seen Naquan Tomlin at the NBA level yet, but he just had a 35-10 game with the Charge. And I understand the G League is not the NBA. I'm not saying these stats will translate. I don't frankly think either of those two in particular would make a seamless transition and be part of the rotation. But with 24 regular season games to go, as I mentioned in my first storyline, how much rest you're going to give some of these guys,
right?
You can get a decent look at maybe a future rotational piece for this team on a very cost-controlled contract. So if it's not a buyout guy, which one of the Cavs' two ways they convert? I lean towards Luke Travers being the guy, even though Tomlin maybe fits more of a need for the roster as it currently stands. But I do think both of those two have been really impressive in the G League stuff I've watched. I haven't watched all of it, but in the stuff I have seen, they both seem like they're too good for the G League and maybe not good enough for the NBA yet. They're like a 4A player in baseball. Who was the guy that got Estevan Florial for the for the Guardians last year? Like, too good for the G League, still probably not an NBA player, but there's potential that they could do something. And in 24 games down the stretch, especially if they lock up the 1 seed early, give one of them a shot. I lean towards Travers. I think Tomlin will probably be the guy, but we'll see. But I am looking forward to seeing which one of those guys gets the chance to kind of showcase their skills on the NBA level.
Travers is the right answer. That's who I think they're highest on of all of these guys. That was a name that came up as a guy that they want to try and keep for next year, that no one's really certain yet what that's going to look like. And that actually segues into my next one. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think I don't think the buyout market has gone the way they thought that it would to this point.
It definitely hasn't.
Yeah.
I can assure you it has not.
Yeah. So if it ends up, I mean, obviously you want a big of some sort. I agree with you. I think as of now, particularly if they leave him in a bench role, Hunter is the backup big. He may still be the backup big, even if he starts as the three. He could start and still be the backup big. It's not ideal, but that's sort of the position that they're in. Mm-hmm. But Travers is somebody that they've liked. They've obviously put a lot of time into developing him, and I think they would like to keep him around beyond this year. It's going to become a numbers game and a cap game, because they're going to be looking at a lot of minimum guys moving forward. But if you're talking about somebody to convert, I think that's who it is.
Jason, before we get to your next pick, let's do a quick read from FanDuel. Guys, you know FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. They're running some incredible basketball promos right now. You can bet on the opening tip, or you can combine a couple of same-game bets into a same-game parlay live on the FanDuel app for some even bigger winnings. If you place a $5 bet right now and you're a new customer, and it wins, you can win $150 in bonus bets. Just head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS to join today. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Jason, we are at the back half of our storyline draft. I have two more I definitely want to get to. So we'll go 8 picks, assuming you don't take one of mine here. And I don't think you will because these two are a little off the mainstay.
Yeah.
So you go. The 5th pick. What do you got?
This is more of a keep an eye on probably than a second half storyline. But keep an eye on Evan Mobley.
That was my mind. Damn it.
But maybe it's the same.
All NBA stuff?
Yeah.
Well, you brought this to my attention, so I'm kind of glad you took it, even though I didn't think you were gonna dig deep into that back pocket again. Explain to the people why this is important.
So the reason this is important, I think he's got a decent chance at making the 3rd team.
Mm-hmm.
He's not making the 1st team, probably not making the 2nd team, but I think he can make the 3rd team. If Evan Mobley makes the All-NBA 3rd team, it starts to complicate the Cavs' cap down the road, which is kind of twisted because in a way you're almost rooting for him not to make the team. So with the max contract that he signed, he's due about $38 million next year. None of these numbers are solidified until the official cap number for next year comes out, and it's a percentage of the cap. But as of now, he'll make $38 million on next year's cap. But if he makes an All-NBA team, if he makes the 3rd team, that goes up to, I think it's $41 million, and then it goes up from there. With where the Cavs are headed with their cap, every dollar counts in future years. So whether he makes an All-NBA team very much could impact their flexibility a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now with some other moves that they have to make, because it not only does year one does the percentage jump, but in all the ensuing years, in the following years, that percentage jumps as well. So obviously, for the Cavs, it's a great thing. For the front office, it's a feather in their cap that they drafted and developed this guy into an All-NBA player. It's all good things, except for the fact that he counts a whole lot more, not a whole lot, but a few million more. But when you start talking about the penalties that come with where they're headed, cap-wise, apron-wise, everything else, they're already going to be a team that cannot use their mid-level next year. They're going to be a second apron team, so they can't use their mid-level to re-sign free agents. We've talked before about Ty Jerome and what kind of contract extension makes sense for him, how high they can go on that. But just the idea of Evan Mobley's All-NBA status and whether he can make one of those teams could impact the Cavs' payroll into the future. It's just something to keep an eye on over the course of the season.
I had it on my list too, Jason. It's a great thing to point out. It is a twisted, dark fantasy world we're living in where a guy you draft and his own success and him flourishing into the player you hoped he could become with the 4th overall or 3rd overall pick a few years ago could somehow also be a giant cap red flag. And it may seem like nothing, $3 million on a $215 or higher $1 million payroll, but that $3 million could be the difference in potentially re-signing a Ty Jerome or getting outbid by a team like Brooklyn. Or when you're looking to sign one more guy, you have, in theory, $4.5 million to sign the last roster spot or your one guy in free agency, as opposed to $1.5 million because that extra $3 million is going to Evan Mobley. It's also worth keeping in mind the NBA got rid of positions with the All-NBA team, so now it's just the top 15 players.
Yeah.
And has Evan Mobley been a top 15 player in the NBA this season? I think he's in that conversation. I don't have the 15 ahead of him in my head at the moment, but he's certainly in the conversation. And if the Cavs finish with 63, 64 wins and are right there with Oklahoma City when it comes to the best record in basketball when it's all said and done, he's going to get some extra love on that vote as opposed to a guy like, let's say, Pascal Siakam, for example, who may be the 5th or 6th seed with Indiana. I didn't think necessarily wins and losses impacted all-star voting all that much. I do think it has a bigger influence when it comes to the All-NBA voting, Jason. And I want Evan to get it. Do not misconstrue anything we're saying with like us rooting against Evan Mobley in terms of us not wanting him to be an All-NBA player. Like, go get your bread. It's good for you. He deserves it. But it really does complicate things for the Cavs, not just this year, but in the next 2 seasons with the cap. And they're already going to be so hamstrung with some of the other contract extensions kicking in that $3 million is not just like losing a penny on the street. Like, that $3 million is like, crap, I lost my wallet. I had $500 in cash in there. I just picked up from the other day that I was going to use at the strip club later tonight. Like, that's the level of difference that a $3 million All-NBA Evan Mobley versus non-All-NBA Evan Mobley could make when it comes to Kobe Altman and company figuring out the direction of this roster. I mean, Let me just give one more example. Sam Merrill's making 2.6 this year. I'm just using Sam as an example. I'm not reporting. Just Evan Mobley gets kicked up. Merrill is probably going to want about $5 million next year. I'm guessing he'll probably sign a 2-year, $10 million contract somewhere. 1 year, $5 million. It'd be a lot more difficult to afford a Sam Merrill with an all NBA Evan Mobley as opposed to him just missing the cut this year. So it's crazy to say, but for the long-term future of the Cavs, you probably don't want it to make an all NBA team, and that feels sacrilegious from a fan and someone covering the team to say, but it's the truth.
And I don't think both Ty and Sam are back next year. I think it's probably an either or. I could be wrong, and I think Ty is the priority on that list over Sam. But
for sure.
Another thing on Evan, you know who is acutely aware of all of this? Evan Mobley. So You think he's got incentive to go and ball out over these last 20 some odd games? What is it? 28 games? Is that right? Is it 28?
No.
24.
They've played 54, so
yeah, 28.
Yeah, 28. Yeah. Sorry.
So he's got incentive. He's certainly got incentive to go out there and bust it these last 28 games.
All right, my next storyline to watch, Jason, is down the stretch here in the final 24 games. Will we see the Cavaliers' offensive shot profile change up at all in order to get prepared to face NBA playoff defenses? The Cavs are shooting a ton of threes, which is not a bad thing. They're shooting an incredible clip. As a team, they lead the NBA in three-point percentage. Historically speaking, we see the number of three-point attempts go down in the playoffs because teams are playing much more intense defense from start to finish. And a lot of times that leads to some more mid-range jump shots and one-on-one creation opportunities for your best ball handlers and creators. And I think part of the reason they acquired DeAndre Hunter is not just because of his defensive versatility, but it's because of the fact that he's a guy that you can give the ball to, you can clear out and say, DeAndre, go get a bucket. We talked about the three-point shooting. He's a 40% three-point shooter this year. One of the better catch-and-shoot three-point shooters in the NBA with volume this season. From the corner, he's been fine. He's 56th percentile, nothing special. But where it is special, percentile-wise speaking at least, is in post-up and mid-range possessions. And he's a guy that Atlanta, with that second unit, would throw the ball to in the high post and say, DeAndre, go to work. And as of last Monday, so it may have changed in the final 2 days of the first half, Hunter was in the 92nd percentile of cleaning the glass in points per post-up possession, and in the 87th percentile in points per mid-range possession, Jason, which means come playoff time, if teams are switching and making it more difficult and there's 6 seconds on the shot clock, you can give the ball to DeAndre Hunter anywhere down in that 12-foot and in range and feel pretty confident he's going to get a halfway decent look. And that's not something I think you'd feel confident in with a Max Strus or a Dean Wade in that situation. And it just gives the Cavs another option offensively to go to if their initial action isn't working or isn't generating an open look. So I don't expect a full-sale change to the offense by any means, but when we start seeing a little bit of tinkering to run some stuff that I think will be effective come playoff time that they may not have had to pull out yet during the regular season.
It's interesting because I've talked to guys before who put teams together, who build these teams and say, like, in the playoffs, sometimes you just need a bucket. You just need somebody who's just going to stop a run, who nothing's working. Just go get us a bucket.
Yeah.
And Karras, when he's right, felt like one of those guys. Now, is he your number one option? No, he's not your number one option, but he's a guy that you can put the ball in his hands and say, just go figure something out. And I think Karras is better at that than DeAndre, but I think DeAndre is different, and you sort of touched on it there. DeAndre is a guy who can maybe back somebody down, which you don't see anymore ever in the NBA. So I don't know that it's necessarily DeAndre. Like Karras could bring the ball up the floor, never pass to anyone, get to the bucket, and get you a basket. I don't know that DeAndre is going to do that, but I think he can fill that role in a different way. On a mismatch or on a mid-range that Karras, it might be a three off the bounce. It might be, so I think it could get you the same result. You're just going to take a different road to get there.
Fair enough. Jason, all right, your final storyline that you are watching down the stretch for this 2025 season.
All I thought we were done. I thought you had 2 left and I took one of yours because I only had 3, but I'll make up another one. Will Kenny Atkinson win Coach of the Year?
I like it.
And will Kobe Altman win Executive of the Year? Because I think both are warranted. I joked with Kobe a few weeks ago, you might be the first executive to win Executive of the Year without making any moves at all.
And they traded for DeAndre Hunter.
Well, he did. That's true. But prior to, you're right. But in the offseason, they brought back the entire team. And that's typically when guys win or lose that award is offseason moves. And now he may have just solidified it depending on how the Hunter thing goes and how this works out. But, Kenny certainly has a chance to win Coach of the Year. I think he's probably the front. I haven't looked at the Vegas odds.
He's the heavy front runner right now.
Yeah, that's no surprise. So he'll probably win that. I don't know that a Cavs executive. I think Wayne Embry in the 80s won Executive of the Year. I don't think anyone since.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
I don't think anyone has done it since. Ferry never did. No executive with LeBron did. So, yeah.
Wayne Embry in 91-92 is the only Cav to ever win the award.
91-92. So you're going back 30-plus years, over 30.
I wasn't born.
Thank you for reminding me because I was in high school, asshole. So appreciate that. You wouldn't think there's that big of an age gap between us, but whatever.
I was born the year after, I was born in 93. So
I was a senior in high school, fall of 93. I was starting my senior year of high school.
That's not that. It's not that big of an age difference.
God. So yeah, that's just. Does it have to do with the on-court impact? No, but I'm making something up on the fly here. So postseason awards, the Cavs are going to get a ton of them with the players, MVP voting and all that, who falls where. No one on this team's winning the MVP, but there will be MVP votes. And then Kenny and Kobe, where do they fall in line with postseason awards? All
right, so the real last storyline I want to follow, and then the fake one I'm going to follow, go hand in hand. The real one is, can the Cavs continue to be the NBA's greatest clutch team of all time?
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you look at their clutch numbers this season, they're straight up absurd. Their net rating, the clutch, I don't have it in front of me. I should have looked this up, but I'm winging this one on the fly too, Jason, because I want to get to my fake one in a sec, which is more fun than this. But their clutch numbers are absurd. I told Kenny one of their clutch stats in the net rating after a game a couple weeks ago, and he didn't believe me because it was so absurd, but I showed him the stat on my phone, and he, I guess we are that. So can they continue being legitimately incredible in the clutch? Garland, we've talked about his clutch numbers at length. Mobley's also been awesome in the clutch. Donovan is not shooting the greatest in the clutch, but he gets good looks, which is all you can really ask for in those situations. So a real answer, can they continue to be the NBA's best clutch team? And that's the kind of stuff that typically does translate to the playoffs. If you can score and get stops in clutch moments in the regular season, because those final 5 minutes is when teams really ramp it up and start playing with postseason intensity. Yeah. That's a good indication you can do it against teams in a 7-game series. So that's my real answer. My fake answer, Jason, is when the season comes to an end, will Ty Jerome still lead the team with holy shit league pass moments? And I've mentioned this fake stat before. I'll mention it again if you've missed it. League pass moments are when you get a text, whether it's from Jason, myself, from anyone that just says, player X now. And you know you got to turn the game on because what they're doing is so special. And my unofficial stat book this season has Ty Jerome currently leading the Cavs with 4 league pass moments this year. The Golden State game, the Philly game, the Atlanta game, and the New Orleans game. And that New Orleans game, to this day, is the single best quarter I've ever seen from a player in my entire life. He had 6 threes in the quarter. 3 of them came from 30-plus feet. I don't think you were sitting next to us that day, Jason, but me and Earl were sitting next to each other just in straight up disbelief. We didn't say a word for 8 minutes. It was just incredible. So he currently leads the Cleveland Cavaliers in Mike Lucas's official stat book. I'm the only one keeping this stat. So it is the official damn stat book in league pass moments this season. He's currently 1 over DG, who has 3. Will Ty Jerome end the season at number 1, which would be the biggest upset since George Foreman beat Mike Tyson, since Team USA beat Russia in the Miracle game, since Avon Lake beat whoever the team they I don't know. It'd be one of the greatest upsets in the history of sports if Ty Jerome finished this season for the not just like Cleveland Cavaliers, but the league leading 44-10 Cleveland Cavaliers in league pass moments. It would be an incredible accomplishment. I would personally write him a document. I'll hand it to him on the final day of the season saying, Ty, congrats. You won a fake award. You may not win 6th man of the year, but you won league pass moment of the year for the Cleveland Cavaliers. That is what I'm really looking forward to, Jason. Can Ty Jerome keep a hold of his stranglehold on the Cavs' most important stat of the season? That's
really funny. To go back to your real one for 1 second, their numbers in the clutch are staggering. And there are guys who are not built for the moment. There are guys who don't have the stomach for game on the line, ball in your hands. How much their numbers are so out of whack to the normal. How much of it is
Are you ready? I have the numbers real quick. Just you ready to laugh? You just ready to laugh at this? So the Cavs have played 22 games this season that, according to NBA.com, are considered clutch games. That is towards the bottom of the league. That is tied for 19th. Golden State and Houston and Minnesota lead the league with 34. So they've played 22 as opposed to 34.
Does that mean all their other games are so lopsided they don't even count?
Yes. They are 16-6 in those 22 games in the clutch moments. For comparison's sake, that is the third most wins in the NBA in clutch moments. Houston leads the NBA with 19 clutch wins in 34 tries. They're 19-15. Atlanta, 17-13. Golden State, 17-17. The Suns, 17-12. And then your Cleveland Cavaliers at 16-6. They have the fewest clutch losses of any team in basketball this season. Their offensive rating in the clutch, Jason, 141.8. Second place, Denver at 129.3. Defensive speaking, their defensive rating in the clutch is 108.1. That's the 11th best in basketball. Orlando's defensive rating in the clutch, Jason, at 91.9. Incredible. But the net rating, the difference between your offensive rating and your defensive rating. In 63 minutes in the clutch this season, they have a net rating of 33.7. Second place, Indiana, 16.5. They are twice as good in the freaking clutch as any other team in basketball. 33.7 to 16.5. After that, 15.8. After that, 12.5, 12.5, 12. They are 20 points better in net rating the clutch than the 4th, 5th, and 6th highest rated clutch teams in basketball this season. It is simply absurd, and it's a testament to these guys.
Okay, so here's the question off of that. How much of that is, we say it all the time, it's a make or miss league. How much of that is these guys really are built different? Because these are the same guys that have been in the league for a number of years, and they didn't produce these types of absurd numbers. So, and again, I don't want to diminish what they're doing because it's unbelievable, but you look at it, it's such an outlier. It's such an anomaly that you look at it and go, well, how is this happening? And again, I don't want to pick on Rodney Hood, but when the Cavs made the move for Rodney Hood a few years ago, I had another executive tell me, like, that dude don't have the stomach for where they're going and where this is, like playing with LeBron and playing in big moments. He ain't built for that. So there are guys who are not built for that. And clearly the Cavs have guys who are. Is it really just that, or is some of this just luck and it's a make or miss league and right now they're going in?
It's probably both. Just for example, their effective field goal percentage in the clutch is 65%. That's 5 points higher than second place. Their true shooting percentage in the clutch, 69.2. That is 6.3 percentage points higher than the Lakers, who are in second place. They have the lowest turnover percentage in the clutch, or they're tied with Oklahoma City at 7.5. They're near the top in defensive rebounding rate, too. That's a lie. They're not near the top. I'm reading that backwards. They're near the bottom in defensive rebounding rate, but that's because they don't miss many shots. So in terms of shooting, true shooting percentage and turnover percentage, they are 1-1 and tied for first. So they're making shots. They're not turning the ball over. That's how you win games in the clutch.
That's how you win games.
So, all right, Jason, that is going to wrap it up here for a Cavs and Coffee Ultimate Cavaliers show. Appreciate you tuning in. We went over our 8 top storylines. We got 9. I even got a bonus one for the second half, the final 28 games of the season for Cleveland. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again for a remote edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show starting at 11 o'clock. If you're angry about that, well, Anthony has 102 fever, and Director Steve is medically not cleared to return to work till tomorrow. So we had no choice, and didn't want to see me or Jason punch the buttons because that would have been even worse than a remote show. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Over 250 here this morning, Jason. So Cavs and Coffee, once again, another big hit, and we will see you guys at 11 o'clock for the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. For Jason, I'm McNuggets. Peace.